We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 billion kids coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a 3rd grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 of our 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America. Systemic racism that has plagued our nation for far too long. I said that over the course of the past year that the blinders have been taken off the nation, the American people. What many Americans didn't see or had simply refused to see couldn't be ignored any longer. Those 8 minutes and 46 seconds that took George Floyd's life opened the eyes of millions of Americans and millions of people around all over the world. It was the knee on the neck of justice, and it wouldn't be forgotten. And it's not white Americans' fault, but just a fact.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white presence from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives. If you believe in this number as I do and would like to join me in the fight for reparations, please email me at friendsofadostv@gmail.com. That's friendsofadostv@gmail.com. What's up, family? Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the Central, in the Mountain, and good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Yes, Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the reparationist perspective, bringing you those Adocs hot topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote and socializing our suffering family. And today, it is our week in review. Okay? These are your Adocs hot topics. This is your Miseducation of Adocs in America book club series. This is your Freedmen's History every day of the year. Right, family? I'm so glad to see you on the live. I have missed you, my loves, very, very much. It has been a challenging time dealing with Racebook and how they constantly throw me in jail, constantly are censoring me, constantly are shadow banning me. So before we jump in, I would love it if you sign up for me on YouTube, like, share, subscribe. That is what they say helps the algorithms. So more people will receive this message. More people can watch live. And we can get everyone under Adocs to move as a block. We at least need critical mass, family. And guess what? With 87% of our electorate voting Biden-Harris without weaponizing the vote, we have a lot of work to do. So before I jump in, family, I want to give my love to Miss Lady K Love. Welcome to the live. Kim Means, thank you for joining the live. Brian Johnson, Gibson Eugene, Soko J, and for all of you who are watching, who have yet to chat where you're slinging bricks for Adocs from, welcome to the live, family. Yes, so Racebook has been throwing me in jail. I think I am out of jail as much as I'm in jail these days. This particular time around, they got on my case because it's okay, I found out, for Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion to exhibit whorish behavior on national network TV, no less. That is totally fine. I just can't call their whorish behavior out because I believe that type of misconduct is detrimental to the Black family. But of course it is. This is a part of the social engineering. And you know me, I was born to talk and tell it like it T.I. is, I tells the T.R. Root. So in Racebook, I happen to talk about the decimation of the Black family behind these kind of thoughts in the music industry allowed to get this over. I talked about the over 60,000 missing Black children who have more than likely been nabbed for their body parts, okay? They're trading their organs on the open markets. They are hustling them into sex trades and making sex slaves of our children. I talked about what this particular culture is doing to our families. And so once I talked about it, of course, they don't want for me to talk about what it's doing to us. But like I said in the chat, how many Jews allow their children to be displayed this way on national TV? Oh, there was another point I made that they did not like. Because you see, you are impressing upon our children to be over-sexualized in such a way that they can be savagely accosted while trying to do the right thing as young Black people. Oh, hold on one second. Is that? Oh, Lord, don't tell me. Hold on. I don't think that's her. Somebody else is hollering. Okay. So, yeah, basically, you are setting our children up to be sexually assaulted when you allow this kind of lewdness to go down on national network television. You know that these girls are really stuck on their body image and wanting to wear scantily clad clothing and wanting to get all type of surgeries to improve on God's perfection that is already inherent in them from the time they're born. They're so busy trying to grow up to be like the Cardi B's and to be like the Meg Thee Stallions. But let me call it out. And then they throw me in Racebook jail for a week. And that shuts my biggest audience, which is Facebook, down. Until I can build in the other spaces, I can't come and speak to y'all. I can speak to YouTube, to Twitter.
but my biggest audience is Racebook. So they do all kinds of things to me because I tell the truth. I now have to start speaking in codes like I see many people doing just to be able to espouse the truth that will set us free. They don't want us to be free. This is the problem, family. We are supposed to be debased and to be fourth class in the country our ancestors built with their lives. That's the agenda. And I'm so glad to have comrades in this fight with me that understand where I'm coming from when I post in Facebook. I'm mostly on Facebook. I'm trying to be present everywhere, but Racebook is what I know. So I'm over there constantly advocating and doing that work and bringing people over to hear politics from the Adocs lens. That's what this show is designed to do, so we can learn to move as a block and learn what our priorities are, which is our self-preservation. Yes, shout out to Adrian Taylor too. So you guys chat amongst you. I'm going to jump into the show because it's going to be pretty lengthy. So let's dig right in. I just wanted to tell you it's good to be back. I've missed you. When I'm MIA like this, it's because Racebook is throwing me in jail. But I'm going to be trying to come on more often. I've got about 8 different series in me. Oh, Lord. And so I'm trying to set aside time to make all of that happen. So since I've got George Floyd on the screen, I'm going to take that off right now because it's just too upsetting. But one of the things I've come to know about who I am in this movement, in this fight, thanks to Travis Johnson, who affectionately named me Ida B. Wells 2.0. Okay. He affectionately named me that. And I really have come to understand what that means. Good to see you, Denise Jarrett, expert stylist. Thank you for joining the live. Yes, I've come to understand what moves me in terms of lending my voice to the excellence in the new Black media. As hard as it can be for me to bring you certain stories, I see I must, because this country, the government and media alike, are complicit in trying to weaponize our oppression and just give it away like candy. Now the Asians are in on the act, and they are the ones with protections, right? They get protection over Adocs, who have been here long before the country was even formed, even longer than that. The 14th century, the 13th century, we've been over here doing this, and we still don't have an anti-lynch law. But you want to pivot because I see your trickery. I see what you're up to. You want to silence Black Lives Mattering and make it about all lives. That's what y'all on, and y'all act like we don't see you. Well, I am here as a reparationist perspective to expose all of the puckery with a P before YouTube, ScrewTube shuts me down. Puckery. I'm here to expose it all and to help us quantify this information so we can execute on the plans I have for us, which is my consistent push for weaponizing the vote, of which I'll get into towards the latter half of the show. So anywho, yeah, they're now trying to make this about Asians when we still aren't allowed to live. We can't live, okay? And so I'm here to bring attention to that in today's show as part of the hot topics. There's so many hot topics, too many to unpack in this one show. But some of the things that triggered me, okay, I'm going to be going over those things. So with that said, I'm going to stop this share and I'm going to jump. So if I can't see your comments, I'll read them when I come back. I have a lot to cover. So let's go first to George Floyd. Okay, so Derek Chauvin trial. The 14 jurors are seated to hear the case of George Floyd. This, I'm reading from March 22nd, 2021, the NPR. I like their outlet. So let's dig right in. A 14th juror was selected in former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's murder trial on Monday, 1 week before opening arguments are scheduled to begin on March 29th. The court initially called for 12 jurors and at least 2 alternates. It could now add additional jurors to the panel in case anyone drops out. Okay, Chauvin, who is white, is charged with second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter in last year's killing of George Floyd, who was black. Adocs specifically. We're unflattening blackness over here because I'm sick of all the oppression being wielded at us and masking our failures. So I'm on Adocs here. You guys are free to create your other channels to talk about other black, but I'm only going to be speaking on black immigrancy in relationship to how we are the oppressed class. We're the majority of the blacks in this country as of today. They're quickly working to replace us with black immigrancy. But right now we're the majority, but what's happening to us is primarily our issue. Case in point, most of the black immigrants, especially one that I recall from one of my prior shows on George Floyd, these black immigrants, this particular juror has a seat on this jury and he works in IT. He's a black immigrant. Now, the problem I've got with that is that these are juries of Chauvin's peers, which he's entitled to as one of the persons in my chat when I did the show on George Floyd a couple of weeks ago. Yes, Chauvin is entitled to a jury of his peers. But I don't understand how a jury of his peers is to the detriment of Adocs. How in the world is picking a black immigrant in IT helpful to Adocs who are experiencing government-sanctioned execution, state-sanctioned execution? Because when the race soldiers like Derek Chauvin get to killing, they're not over in the black immigrants' neighborhoods where they are median income of $150,000. They wouldn't be in his neighborhood policing. So yes, get a jury of your peers right in the neighborhood where you're constantly killing and harassing Adocs. That's my rub with a jury of Chauvin's peers. You can put on 6 white folks and the rest are predominantly immigrant. There's only one black woman on that jury. Furthermore, there were 2 jurors that had to be dismissed because why? They said that $27 million civil suit, which I believe was going to be exponentially more had they waited to settle the civil suit until after the verdict, which I believe he's going to walk or do very little time, and I'll make my point shortly. I believe that these things should be settled later because now you've got 2 jurors that had to be excused. I think it was a white man and a black man had to be excused off the jury because they said that $27 million settlement is going to sway their opinion about Chauvin. With a $27 million settlement to them, I guess, that means he's guilty. Okay, so they got rid of those 2 because they said they were influenced by the civil suit, and now they're getting more. But let's go back to the text. The court initially, Chauvin, who is white. Okay, let me jump down. The jury reflects a range of ethnicities, although slightly over half the jurors have been described in court as white. Among the 14 seated, there are 3 black men, including 2 who are immigrants, 1 black woman, 2 women who identify as multiracial, 2 white men, and 6 white women. Now, when you're dealing with these type of people, like I mentioned in my last segment on George Floyd, there was a 16-page questionnaire that was more about profiling us as Adocs to keep us out of consideration, right? But when you're dealing with people, black and white alike, you're dealing with people from areas where the police aren't present. You're dealing with people with a certain income bracket, with a certain wealth position that aren't of a George Floyd's ilk. And you're dealing with people who believe in the officers. That's what they were seeking in those 16 pages. They were profiling Adocs because we understand that they're in our distressed communities that have been robbed of resources, okay, robbed of education, redlined into environmentally racist communities, environmentally racist tenement housing, underemployed, unemployed, You see, that's where the race soldiers are. So when you have a makeup like this, it should not comfort you that it's diverse. I mean, let's look at the government, for example. How diverse is it? And we still, to this day, don't have an executive order. We still don't have an anti-lynch law. We still don't have economic justice. Economic inclusion. We are literally being wiped off the face of this country that our ancestors built with their lives, while they sit up and get committed to a cashless HR 40 study. Okay, and I'm going to share with you in a minute why that's problematic. The trial is expected to last at least 4 weeks. The 2 alternate jurors won't know of their status until the panel heads to the deliberation phase. Jury selection in the case has often moved more quickly than was predicted. When it began on March 9, the process was expected to last several weeks as the judge, prosecutors, and defense attorneys quizzed dozens of potential jurors about their lives and any opinions they held about Floyd's death in police custody last Memorial Day. The relatively fast pace endured despite the loss last week of 2 jurors who were struck from the panel after they said that because of Minneapolis' recent $27 million settlement with Floyd's family, they can no longer promise to be impartial. Now, let's go back to the text. Remember, there were 3 black men selected, 2 they said were immigrants. Was the juror they got rid of Adocs? You see, you've got to always read with your third eye. Was the juror that they got rid of 2 men, 1 black man and a white man, was it a black immigrant that couldn't be partial or couldn't be impartial, or was it a black Adocs? You see why you must unflatten blackness and refer to yourself as a black American descendant of Choctaw slavery, because these are the ways these Mickey Fickies continue to get over on executing us with impunity. Okay? This is how it happens. You come up with a 16-page dossier for Adocs to fill out, to eliminate them from this process, to get a jury that believes in policing, even though the over-policing is not happening in their communities. Back to the text. A wave of publicity about that payout prompted Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill to give both sides of the case additional preemptory challenges to strike potential jurors from the panel. The jury reached 14 members days after Cahill denied defense motions to move the case to another venue or delay the proceedings. Steps that Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, called for because of the potential impact of the settlement news on the jury pool. Quote, I do not think that would give the defendant any kind of a fair trial beyond what we are doing here today, Cahill said on Friday. I don't think there's any place in the state of Minnesota that has not been subjected to extreme amounts of publicity on this case. Me speaking. This is a moot point, family. Unless you live under a rock amongst the mole people, which we have living underground in the sewers, unless you're a mole person and have no access to the media or the newspapers, where can you go to get a trial that they want to swing in their direction? Nowhere in this country. There's nowhere in this country you can run or hide or in the known world that doesn't know about the George Floyd case. So this is more delay stall tactics. The initial jury pool included 326 people. As of late last week, Cahill said that the court had questioned around 60 of them. The selection process continued on Monday as the judge and the 2 sides of the case sought to ensure the jury is fair and impartial. As of around midday Monday, the defense had used 14 of its 18 challenges and the prosecutors had used 8 of their 10 challenges, Cahill said. In another ruling from Friday, Cahill found that only a portion of the evidence and details from an earlier police stop of Floyd would be allowed in the trial. Did you hear that? Only a portion of the evidence and details from an earlier police stop of Floyd would be allowed in the trial. But guess what is on trial, family? Oh, forgive me. What is it, babe? I'm on my live. Genesis, I'm in my show. Are you home? Yeah. All right, buzz the door. Okay. Sorry, family. Adocs life happening over here. Child, the ghetto. Okay, so it says Cahill noted similarities. Okay, let me go back to that point I was trying to make before I was interrupted. And another ruling from Cahill found that only a portion of the evidence. Now, they want to sit up here, the defense, and I'll get into it just a second. Let me jump to this article real quick. Where's it at? Okay. Let me read this so I don't have to read the whole thing of this article. We can move on. Okay, so you just heard me state that they don't want to even involve the other police stop of George Floyd. But let me share with you something over here. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner's autopsy listed Floyd's cause of death as heart failure due to law enforcement subdual restraint and neck compression and ruled it a homicide. Yes. Okay, family, give me a second. The intercom is not working. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience, family. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner's autopsy listed Floyd's cause of death as heart failure due to law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression, and ruled it a homicide. The medical examiner, Dr. Andrew Baker, also noted Floyd's arteriosclerotic and hypertensive heart disease, fentanyl intoxication, and recent methamphetamine use as other significant conditions. Chauvin's defense attorneys have argued those other conditions, let me remind you what they were: arteriosclerotic and hypertensive heart disease, fentanyl intoxication, and recent methamphetamine use are the other conditions that the defense attorneys for Chauvin are going to charge were the real cause of death. But they're not going to allow evidence of a prior harassment by the race soldiers of George Floyd preceding this particular death. I don't even believe that they are allowing any of the other 18 charges against Chauvin. His record is horrific. His record is horrific. Let's talk about it. Chauvin's record as a police officer in Minneapolis was littered with allegations of misconduct and excessive force. 18 complaints were filed against him over his 19-year career, according to CNN and Insiders Haven, Oricio aggressive, I don't know what that means, agresis. Only 2 of those complaints were closed with discipline. Okay? None of this can come in. What we know, though details of one remain unclear, a Minneapolis woman, Melissa Borton, told the LA Times she filed one of the complaints in August 2007 that ended with a formal letter of reprimand against Chauvin. Borton said Chauvin and another officer pulled her over as she was returning home from the grocery store with her infant. The officers approached her car, reached inside without a word, unlocked her door, pulled her out, put her in the back of a police cruiser, she said. She told the newspaper that Chauvin and the other officer released her roughly 15 minutes later without an explanation. The reason for the traffic stop? Borton had been driving 10 miles over the speed limit. Records obtained by the Times said that Chauvin was later told that he did not have to remove complainant from the car. The other 16 complaints against Chauvin were closed without discipline. The Minneapolis Police Department hasn't released any details about the complaints or why they were closed. My point in all this, family, is that all the things that could help to convict this man are pretty much being left out. While they're able to weaponize what was going on with George Floyd at the time, they recently threw in COVID. Now, that was in none of the earlier reports, but somewhere along the line, now he had COVID too. What I'm trying to say here is, but for that knee on his neck, he'd have still been living with all of them ladies I just singled out. He was in his car breathing just fine until the knee on the neck. Anyway, back to the text. I just want to string that together of what they're allowing and what they will not allow to set the stage, in my humble opinion, for this man to walk or to get a very, very light sentence. Cahill noted similarities between Floyd's interaction with police on May 25th, 2020, and the earlier police stop on May 6, 2019. In both instances, the judge said there were signs that Floyd had ingested drugs after being approached by police officers. In the 2 cases, Cahill said, Floyd's physical behavior is remarkably similar. But the judge also said Floyd's emotional behavior from that earlier encounter was not admissible. And he restricted how much of a police video recording from the 2019 arrest could be used in court. The only recordings from the 2019 incident that are relevant to the current case, he added, are segments that could be linked to the cause of Floyd's death and his medical condition. The case is being closely watched, with Floyd's death having inflamed widespread protests against racial inequality and police brutality. Okay, so let me see if there was anything more I wanted to share with you guys about that. This is one last piece to end this story at this stage. We'll keep our eye on it under the Adocs Hot Topics, okay? The trial will not debate Floyd's symbolism or merits of Black Lives Matter. Instead, it will mainly focus on 2 things: the cause of death and Chauvin's intent. The cause of death and Chauvin's intent. Okay, so keep that in mind and just brace yourselves, family. A conviction of any real serious sentence, just be pleasantly surprised instead of, devastated by what's about to come. Okay. Now, I want to also, before I finish out this story, talk about how the House approved a police reform bill named after George Floyd, and how this does not help if these measures were in place. I'm just wanting to point out how weak this stuff is, because none of this would have saved George Floyd's life. Okay? And I want to talk about how New York has a bill to dismantle qualified immunity in part. We're going to get into that one after this. So, House lawmakers on Wednesday passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, a reform bill that would ban chokeholds and also alter so-called qualified immunity for law enforcement, which would make it easier to pursue claims of police misconduct. The 220 to 212 vote, mostly along party lines, came 9 months after Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, Adocs, was killed by Minneapolis police officers last spring. The wide-ranging legislation would also ban no-knock warrants in certain cases, mandate data collection on police encounters, prohibit racial and religious profiling, and redirect funding to community-based policing programs. Now, I said on an earlier program with the ETM Media Group, shout out to you guys. They did an extraordinary job. Do subscribe to them on YouTube. They're bringing cutting-edge Adocs style politics in their platform as well. There's a bunch of great new black media to watch to replace the lying corporatist called the CNN, the corporate with 3 Ks news network. They're not dealing with politics with an Adocs spin. And that's the beauty of going to subscribe to all of our shows over there on YouTube. It's some great work happening over there where you can get even more informed. So check out the ETM Media Group. They were awesome today. It was great to be on their show. But what I shared on that show earlier about this wide-ranging legislation is that none of this would have helped George Floyd. This no-knock warrants, he got killed from asphyxiation with that man's knee on his neck. Mandate data collection on police encounters. I don't know why that's not already happening. Prohibit racial and religious profiling. They said that he was accosted in his car from a grocery store vendor, an immigrant grocery store vendor who placed a call about a fake $20 bill. Had he had his stimulus check, maybe he wouldn't have needed to try to pass a $20 bill. I don't even believe that happened. Anywho, so you can't put that under prohibiting racial and religious profiling and redirect funding to community-based policing programs. Community-based policing programs. Okay? None of this would have stopped Chauvin from putting his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Furthermore, this is not about even trying to train the race soldiers. The FBI in 2006 released a report that the police stations throughout the country are overwrought with white inferiors. I don't call them supreme. Ain't nothing supreme about white inferiors. Not anything other than the fact that they killed and stole everything from us to make us the bottom caste in the country our ancestors built with their lives. That's inferior. You're inferior. Every time we built it, they killed it. So there's nothing supreme in that. My new word for them is white inferiors. So these white inferiors have infiltrated all of the police forces throughout the country. And yet, our black organizations are deemed terrorists, and the KKK is not deemed domestic terrorists to this day. And they don't seem to have any issues with knowing how to behave when it came to Dylan Roof after executing 9 Adocs in the church down there in the Carolinas. They didn't need any special training when it came to that fool that was sexually repressed and having a bad day down in Georgia who executed 8 people. He was taken alive. They had no problem with the fool upstate in Oregon who killed 10 people. He got captured alive. But when it comes to weaponless Adocs, we're just executed while sleeping, while jogging, while driving, while running from them. No weapons. but all of a sudden they forget about how to be police when it comes to the race soldiers. Their training goes out the window miraculously when it comes to Adocs in our own communities. And once again, if you're only worth $8 liquid in Boston, $11 liquid in Miami, $200 liquid in LA, to Black immigrants, 60,000 liquid, African immigrants, that was a 2014 report. It's much more than that by now since COVID. That last Color Wealth LA report from 2004 to 2014 showed ADOCs down from 16 to 5%, only 200 liquid, 44% of the degree with a median income of $53,500, to African immigrants, 60,000 liquid with a median income of, I want to say, 100,000. In Boston, the Caribbean immigrants from that same period, right? The Color of Wealth Boston, liquid assets for the Caribbean immigrants is 12,000 from that report, as compared to liquid assets for ADOC, $700. Okay, so where do you think these race soldiers are going to be over policing? In the neighborhood where you're $60,000 to $100,000 liquid, or in the neighborhoods where you're less than 200 liquid? Okay, so miss me with all this kind of huff puff until you dismantle qualified immunity all throughout this country and hold these race soldiers responsible for executing us. None of this stops. And none of it has stopped since George Floyd. Okay. Now let's go over to what New York is doing. New York City Council. I learned this on the show I was featured on today. New York City Council passes bill to limit qualified immunity for police. Limit. Police reform advocates have targeted such policies which make it more difficult to sue a police officer. March 26th this year, and this is in Al Jazeera news outlet. New York City Council has passed legislation that would effectively end qualified immunity for police officers in cases of excessive force and unreasonable searches, making it easier for people to sue individual officers. So-called qualified immunity policies shield on-duty officers from being held personally accountable in civil rights lawsuits if their conduct does not violate, quote, clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. The legal concept, which dates back to 1960s court rulings, often creates an insurmountable barrier for those seeking to hold officers accountable. The policies, which do not apply to lawsuits against local, state, or federal government, have become one of the targets of police reform advocates across the country amid months of protests sparked by the execution of George Floyd, an unarmed Black man, after an officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota, knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes in May of 2020. A bill passed by the Democrat-controlled U.S. House of Reps in early March also seeks to curtail, you see these words they're using, family, qualified immunity as a defense for police. It has not yet been brought to vote in the Senate. The New York City legislation would end qualified immunity for police officers in New York City by creating a new local civil right protecting New Yorkers against unreasonable search and seizures and against excessive force, and ban the use of qualified immunity or substantially equivalent immunities as a defense, the council said in a statement on Thursday. It means that qualified immunity could not be used as a defense when residents sue a police officer under the local city statutes rather than the federal or state statutes. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio has voiced support for the legislation, which contains other police reform measures, including giving the city's independent police oversight board resources and authority to investigate racial bias in policing. If signed into law, New York City would be the largest jurisdiction in the U.S. to curtail the qualified immunity defense. The city's police unions have vocally opposed the bill. Yeah, they want to continue to execute us with impunity. Of course, they want to oppose the bill, saying ending qualified immunity could have a chilling effect on officers' willingness to insert themselves into complex and dangerous situations to enforce the law. Oh, like in no-knock warrants that executed Breonna Taylor. Okay. I could go on and on and on. Like George Floyd sitting in his car when you took a knee to his neck for close to 9 minutes. These were complex and dangerous situations. You got vigilantes getting out on bail. That Kyle Rittenhour, who executed 2 Black Lives Matter protesters and injured severely a third. He made bail because the white inferiors like him raised about $250,000. You see what happens to you when they neutralize us economically. We were only able to raise, I want to say, something ridiculously low, like $600 for the boyfriend to Breonna Taylor. When the race soldier came for him and wanted to sue him for shooting his ass in the leg when he busted up through that house and executed Breonna. But because they've killed and stolen all of the wealth that they now eat from, that we now lack as the anchor of the country, they were able to raise the bail. I want to say it was something ridiculous. I want to say it was $2 million, something ridiculous. He made bail because they raised that money. How in the world are you even able to bail when you killed 2 Black Lives Matter protesters? How do you even have a bail? Would we have had a bail? No. Anywho, the city's police unions have vocally opposed the bill, saying, okay, we did that part. In a tweet, New York City Council Speaker Corey Johnson said qualified immunity policies are rooted in our nation's history of systemic racism and should never even have been allowed. I'm proud that we took action today to end it here in New York City, he said. Qualified immunity will be closely watched as the trial of Derek Chauvin, the officer charged with murder and manslaughter in Floyd's death, begins on Monday. While the concept does not directly relate to the criminal trial against Chauvin, legal scholars have pointed out that even if convicted, it remains unclear if Chauvin would still be shielded from civil lawsuits filed by Floyd's family. Well, they got $27 million. Perhaps they can go back for more. Johanna C. Schwartz, a law professor at the University of California, Los Angeles, has noted that the Floyd family would have to find cases in which earlier defendants were found to have violated the law in precisely the same way as the more recent cases. This is why it's hard for us to get convictions, family. We've been legislated out of any fairness in the law. The Black man has no rights that the white man is bound to respect. That's the Dred Scott case. And so they don't have to call us niggas anymore. They just build it and bake it into the legislation. Ending qualified immunity, she wrote, in the wake of Floyd's death would shift the focus in these cases from an arcane exercise in finding a prior court decision with identical facts and instead draw attention to whether government officials have exceeded their constitutional authority. So I'm here to tell you, family, this is a great step in the right direction. So we receive it. And it is because of, all of us getting in an uproar. It wasn't just Adocs, it was the nation and the world. And so these measures are starting to happen. Although the arm of justice is slow, lean in, family. This is a step in the right direction. Compton, okay, so next story, I want to talk about how the corporate with 3K news media and the government, Joe Biden, are complicit in usurping the message and weaponizing what happened to George Floyd against Black Lives Matter to give protections to the Asians. Okay, I've done a prior segment on this, so I'm not going to be too long-winded on this point. But I do want you to understand how there is an anti-Adocs sentiment, anti-Black sentiment. I'm sure, yes, indeed, some Black immigrants fall under this as well. But by and large, as a majority of Black in this country, the majority of the oppression is wielded towards us as Adocs, American descendants of chattel slavery. The C is for chattel. Anywho, so I want you guys to understand what's happening here. They want to make us fourth-class citizens in the country our ancestors built with their lives and deny us our justice claim. Just like Dr. Claude Anderson said at the top of the show. Okay, he said at the top of the show that if you think you didn't get nothing as second-class citizens in this country, wait until you become fourth-class citizens. Right now, these immigrants outnumber us 70 million to our 35 million, and Biden and Harris have designs to give access and a pathway to citizenship to 22 million more. So what they've done is they've neutralized us economically, and now they're coming to neutralize the Black vote. They don't want to need our vote, because now that we're awakened to the fact that we've been giving them our votes free and clear since FDR without demanding much in exchange. Now that we are awoke, especially the new Black media, and we're leaning in and our messages are out there and the young people are taking grasp of it, they now know moving forward, in order to get the vote, they're going to have to give us tangibles before we give them the vote. Okay. And I'll tell you what I'm imploring upon all of us to move as a block with the way we weaponize our vote towards the latter part of the show. So in Compton, on the 22nd, there was a Compton shooting. Family of murdered 27-year-old Asian woman calls for the hate crime investigation. Beautiful woman, but it's clear that she's Black or Blasian, like what was it? What's his name? Tiger Woods. He's called Blasian or whatever the hockey sticks. Okay, so a family is looking for answers after a 27-year-old mother was gunned down in Compton. Now let me help you understand something. In this country, the oppression by the Asians against Adocs has been, when you're dealing proportionate, given their numbers in this country, it has been very much akin to the white oppression and executions of Adocs. You know, we'll never forget Latasha Harlins. It's been about 20 years ago, but we'll never forget that young 15-year-old girl that was executed by that Asian grocery store owner in our communities. Her anniversary just came up. That woman executed her over an orange juice and walked. We won't forget about Peter Liang executing Gerling in the New York projects in the stairwell. We won't forget about the race soldier who took out Philando Castile. You understand? And yet, do you see the sleight of hand by the race soldiers, the corporate news media with 3 Ks? Do you see how they're trying to flip it and make this narrative? Hello, Jeannie Mai from The View. Yeah, I came for you in a prior video. How she and Lonnie Love are sitting up here imploring upon Asians not to bring the hammer of the government down on Adocs. And because we're now coming after their elders. Now, I need to share with you that when they did an analysis of the actual hate crimes against Asians, 68% of what they call anti-Asian racist sentiment is due to them being called names. I know they recently had 8 slain. I'm not trying to get into a pissing match, but how many of us have been slain by the race soldiers? Let's look this up real quick and read this. Okay, I got to read this to you, and then we'll go back. But I need for you to understand the sleight of hand here. As Jenny Mai and them implore upon us to stop hurting their people. When we all know that they are Asian white inferiors who are complicit in the same white inferior at large of this country's oppression and execution, annihilation, is disdain for us in our communities, where they own the shops, they own the liquor stores, they own the nail salons, they own it all. So there were 3,800 anti-Asian racist incidents, mostly against women, in the past year. I can't even count the number of anti-Adocs racist incidents against Adocs in this country since before the country was formed. But let's get into it. This is an intersectional dynamic going on that others may perceive both Asians and women and Asian women as easier targets, one professor said. New data has revealed over the past year the number of anti-Asian hate incidents, which can include shunning, slurs, and physical attacks, is greater than previously reported. How is this greater than our need for an anti-lynch law? How is shunning, slurs, and physical attacks warranting an executive order for the protections of Asians than an executive order for an anti-lynch law? Yeah, answer it in the chat. Okay, so I'm not trying to mitigate what's happening to the Asians, but I need for you guys to understand you voted for this. When you put someone in office that tells you they're not doing anything specifically for your group or that nothing will fundamentally change, you are voting for the peril and the disappearance and the extinction of your own people. You are voting for us to become fourth class in the country our ancestors built with their lives. You are voting for a media that tells you replacing a president in office for 4 years with no records against American descendants of chattel slavery is a sound vote to have him be replaced with racist plural in office a combined 65 years with records against Adocs several New York City blocks long. That is what happens. You're looking at people who are really complicit right now and trying to wipe out the fact that Black lives don't matter in this country. But I want to share something else that I found awesome. China called Blinken out behind this. Blinken. Okay, so let me jump to this article. So China, Blinken, Tony Blinken went over there on a Zoom, wherever they were, talking about human rights violations. Okay, human rights. You over there talking to these people about human rights violations. Well, China has some choice words, and I want to share that with you. Just a second. Okay, so Blinken slams China over retaliatory sanctions on the U.S. and Canadian officials. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on Saturday night denounced retaliatory sanctions imposed by China on American and Canadian officials as baseless. Why it matters. In an escalating feud over human rights abuses in Xinjiang, China announced sanctions earlier Saturday on officials, including USCIRF Chair Gail Manchin, wife of Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat in West Virginia, and USCIRF Vice Chair Tony Perkins. Canadian Member of Parliament Michael Chong and the Subcommittee on International Human Rights in Canada's House of Commons were also sanctioned, days after the US, UK, European Union, and Canada penalized Chinese officials deemed responsible for abuses in Xinjiang. The State Department and several legislative bodies have recognized the abuses against Uyghur Muslims and other minorities as genocide. What they're saying, Blinken said in an emailed statement that the U.S. condemns China's baseless sanctions on the officials, noting these were apparently in retaliation for U.S. sanctions on Chinese officials connected with serious human rights abuse in Xinjiang. Beijing's attempts to intimidate and silence those speaking out for human rights and fundamental freedoms only contribute to the growing international scrutiny of the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang, he added. Okay, China, I wanted to read you what they had to say about it. So apparently China's retaliating, and Blinken is condemning them. Give me a second. China to the U.S. So they're trying to get China together on human rights, and the Chinese officials suggest the U.S. should handle its own human rights problems and not meddle in China's affairs. Let's get into it. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had a tense first meeting with top Chinese officials in Anchorage, Alaska. Chinese diplomats said the U.S. should focus on issues like Black Lives Matter instead of meddling. Blinken brought up China's actions in Hong Kong and Xinjiang, which Chinese diplomats rebuffed. China told the U.S., focus on your own human rights issues like the Black Lives Matter movement and stop meddling in the country's internal affairs, particularly concerning Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Xinjiang. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken engaged in a war of words with China's top diplomat Zhang Jiechi and State Councilor Wang Yi in Anchorage, Alaska, as the two sides kicked off a tense first meeting since Biden's inauguration. Blinken, Wang, and Yang traded barbs over their parallel meeting tables after Blinken said that the U.S. intended to defend a rules-based order, particularly regarding China's actions in Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Taiwan. Without this order, Blinken said it would be might make right winner takes all and a much more violent and unstable world. Each of these actions threatens the rules-based order that maintains global stability, Blinken said, referencing as well Chinese cyber attacks on the U.S. and attempts at economic coercion of U.S. allies. That's why they're not merely internal matters and why we feel an obligation to raise these issues here today, Blinken said. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan echoed Blinken's statement, saying that China had started an assault on basic values. We do not seek conflict, but we welcome stiff competition, he said. Yang responded by warning the U.S. against meddling and interference in China's internal affairs, stating that the country would not accept unwarranted accusations while mocking the U.S.'s own human rights record and domestic stability. And I quote, "We hope the United States will do better on human rights. China has made steady progress in human rights, and the fact is there are many problems within the United States regarding human rights, which it has itself admitted, Yang said. The challenges facing the U.S. in human rights are deep-seated and did not just emerge over the last 4 years. For our two countries, it is important that we manage our respective affairs well, instead of deflecting the blame on someone else in this world. He added that the U.S. should change its own image and stop advancing its own democracy in the rest of the world. Many people within the United States actually have little confidence in the democracy of the United States, Yang said. Get them together, Yang. The U.S. does not represent the world. It only represents the government of the United States, he added, contesting the U.S.'s right to speak for other countries. The contentious back and forth continued when Blinken insisted on responding to the Chinese officials, stating that a hallmark of U.S. leadership at home is a constant quest to, as we say, form a more perfect union. And that quest, by definition, acknowledges our imperfections, acknowledges that we're not perfect, Blinken said. He then referred to an earlier meeting between Biden and President Xi Jinping when both were still vice presidents. Biden at the time said, "It's never a good bet to bet against America," Blinken told Wang and Yang, and that remains true today. The two countries are meeting in Anchorage for 2 days for what the U.S. administration aims to be a broader strategic conversation about its concerns about China's recent behavior and to address areas that could be of mutual interest. Blinken has previously highlighted concerns over China's political maneuvers in the South and East China Seas, its aggressive economic practices, and the country's handling of human rights abuses of the ethnic minority Uyghur population in Xinjiang, which the U.S. has previously said amounts to genocide. They've got some nerve, family. They've got some nerve. But I'm happy to report to you that there are some Asians out here that actually get it, and they've been on YouTube to undo the lies that both the Asian and the whites are participating in to make this anti-Asian sentiment about Adocs racial hate towards Asians. And I'm very happy and hope to have a couple of these women on my show in the future. I'm very, very proud. I've shared it in my Facebook, and I will share excerpts on another show because I don't have that queued up to share with you today. But do know that I'm feeling good about where we are, because the people that have awakened who already were woke to the racism right in this country against Adocs are calling the U.S. out. The U.S. has some nerves creating the problems throughout this country and the world, and then want to police everybody else about how they do politics. You want to sit up here and complain about Russiagate co-opting our elections when you're meddling in everybody's elections abroad. Okay? You're paying to start wars in these countries, creating an economic crisis for the people there. You murdered Gaddafi. Now his Libyans are being re-enslaved. Come on now. You meddle in everybody's business. You create the problems, and then you want the Adocs vote so you can be the solution, right? And it just thrills me to see woke Asians speaking out about the puckery. Yeah. It makes me very, very proud to see that happening. And I just want to let you guys know, hey, the Asians are the ones who have anti-Black sentiment against us. You can look up on YouTube and see them beating the pulp out of us, choking us as women up in their hair stores, and doing all manner of things to us, executing us and getting away with murder. So don't let these people who are complicit, the government and corporate with 3K's news media are complicit in trying to make this about all lives matter and class-based policies which we know neither of which will make Adocs whole, neither of which will bring about social and economic justice for Adocs. So I need you guys to lean in, because George Floyd, we are at George Floyd 846, and that has awakened the country and the world. I liken this to how civil rights wasn't really possible until Martin Luther King strategically had the news media in there to watch those race soldiers beat us with batons, jail us, spray us with water hose down in the South. Once the world got involved, we then got those civil rights. So the world is watching and holding the U.S. government accountable for its oppression and execution of Adocs. Hence, which gives way to qualified immunity being dismantled. Prayerfully, private prisons will be dismantled. Prayerfully, the reparations, we are owed in the trillions. They will start to cut those checks because we have to continue to keep the pressure on. This is what your sharing videos like mine is doing to change the overall sentiment towards Adocs in this country. And it's been a long time coming. I say lean in. Now, next story. Let's get rid of all this. I think I've said all I want to say on that topic for now. Close these out. Let's get into these reparations. These pretend reparations. Let's talk about it. So, Evanston recently approved housing grants as part of the city's local reparations program, believed to be the first of its kind in the nation. Now, you would think we would be turning somersaults over something like this, right? But we're not. I am so over these Mickey Fickies trying to pass off a housing grant of $25,000 that has all these conditions on it for, I want to say, about 16 people that qualify in Evanston, because most of them don't fit the criteria, as reparations. Stop calling these things reparations. Reparations is cash and lots of it. Now, this could be a part of your Black agenda, but to call these things reparations is a punch in the stomach. And I'm going to play for you what an older woman who voted against this had to say about it in just a second. Evanston approves housing grants as part of city's local repair program, believed to be the first of its kind in the nation. Evanston alderman Monday evening approved the first expenditures in the city's landmark municipal reparations program designed to compensate Black residents for codified discriminations. Officials in the suburbs say the initiative, which has been in the planning stages since 2019, is designed to address the discriminatory housing policies and practices faced by Black residents. The $10 million program, the first of its kind in the nation, when approved in 2019, will be funded through marijuana sales tax revenue, along with some donations. The specific measure approved Monday in an 8-to-1 vote establishes a $400,000 housing grant program, the first expenditure of that larger fund. Alderman Robin Rue Simmons, who first proposed the reparations initiative, called the portion of the program approved Monday a first step. So it is alone not enough, Simmons said. We all know that the road to repair and justice in the Black community is going to be a generation of work. It's going to be many programs and initiatives and more funding. Where is the cash in the people's pockets to do with the money as they please? Like this country was able to do with the money as they please. Support, these checks should have been issued. 10 million, cut the check. Give the money directly to the people of Evanston that fit the qualifications. We don't need you doling out housing grants for people who aren't even gainfully employed to sustain the home once they use it for a down payment. All these restrictions around how they use the money. Back to the text. Supporters hope Evanston's decision will pave the way for more reparations programs across the nation. Not akin to this, cut the check. Nobody needs for you to decide how we spend our money. That's the problem I've got with this nonsense. Quote, for the first time, the U.S. is moving in the right direction. I believe this surge of goodwill began in Evanston about 2 years ago, said the Reverend Michael Neighbors of Second Baptist Church in Evanston. The resolution approved Monday directs initial funding of $400,000 from the city's local reparations fund to a housing program that will award eligible individuals up to $25,000. That money can be used to help with the home down payment or closing cost assistance within the city, help pay for repairs, improvements, or modernizations of an Evanston property, or help pay down mortgage principal, interest, or late penalties on Evanston property, according to a memo from Kimberly Richardson, interim assistant city manager. To qualify, an applicant must have, quote, origins in any of the Black racial and ethnic groups of Africa, according to the memo. Applicant must also be a Black resident of Evanston between 1919 and 1969, or that person's direct descendant. Applicants also qualify if they experience housing discrimination due to the city's policies or practices after 1969. Research documented by a city subcommittee shows that historically Evanston rules largely limited Black residents to the triangle between the North Shore Canal, the Union Pacific Railroad tracks, and Church Street, among other discriminatory practices. The local reparations restorative housing program acknowledges the harm caused to Black African-American Evanston residents due to discriminatory housing policies and practices and inaction on the part of the city, the resolution reads. This program is a step toward revitalizing, preserving, and stabilizing Black African-American owner-occupied homes in Evanston, increasing home ownership and building the wealth of Black African-American residents, building intergenerational equity amongst Black African-American residents, and improving the retention rate of Black African-American homeowners in the city of Evanston. The resolution reads, the program will be paid for with the city's 3% cannabis sales tax, according to the memo. The city also received about $21,340 in private donations to the fund. In November 2019, Evanston Alderman approved a measure that directed all sales tax revenue collected from recreational marijuana purchases with a cap of $10 million to the local reparations fund. While the historic vote sets a precedent for the nation, some local residents in recent months have questioned if the housing program is the right use of the money. Alderman Cicely Fleming, 9th Ward, who cast the lone vote against the measure, said she did so because, quote, what we have here before us tonight, I would counter, is a housing program with the title reparations. She said the housing program does not allow people to dictate the terms of how they are repaired. I don't even need to do the video. Thank God, because we're running out of time. Other residents said they wanted reparations in the form of cash payments, not mortgage assistance. Quote, I want reparations like any Black person in this city does, said Evanston resident Rose Cannon, who supports cash payments. But I am willing to step back and not take this in the package in which it's presented to me. Incoming Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss, whose terms will start in May, issued a statement Sunday in support of the approved plan. Reparations is a huge, difficult, and complex project that seeks to address the damage done by white supremacy, one of the great prolonged evils in human history. It will not be solved on the first try, Biss wrote. On the contrary, we will have to try many different approaches, listen with an open mind to learn from what works and what needs to be changed, and adjust our strategy on an ongoing basis. In his statement, Biss said the city will continue with the process that is only just beginning. Targeting housing support was also an effort to address the city's declining Black population, which has dropped from 22.5% of the population in 2000 to 16.9% in 2017, according to the U.S. Census data, due to gentrification, due to economic exclusion, due to unemployment, underemployment, being redlined into environmentally racist communities, due to the preschool to prison pipeline, lack of home ownership, lack of business ownership, a total erasure, and our affirmative action benefiting white women, immigrants, and LGBTQIA over Adocs, who it was intended for. This is why. And so I love the lady. I want to share it anyway, y'all. Just listen. Y'all know how to go to bed if you just get too tired of it, okay? Whatever. I'm going to share it because it is such a great video. Let me pull it up. I'm sorry. I just need to share it with you all because it's great. And, you know, I'm going to read my copyright disclaimer because they love shutting parts of my video down if I don't do that. Just give me a second, family, while I pull up the vid, okay? Hold on. I'm going to share this copyright disclaimer while I look up the video. Just give me a second to cue it up. Because it's just rich. I want you to hear it in her own words. She says it better than me. And that newspaper article didn't do what she said justice. So you must hear it over here at the reparationist perspective. It's very befitting for the topic in the show at large. Okay. Just a second, family. It's coming. Uh-oh. Okay, here we go. She does it so eloquently. Let's listen to her. Give me a breath. I can take a breath.
Of racist government policies. The Chicago suburb voted to give a total of $400,000 to a small number of Black residents harmed by discriminatory housing practices between 1919 and 1959. The $25,000 grants can be used on housing costs such as home repairs, mortgages, or down payments. For decades, Evanston banks and builders refused to work with Black people unless they lived in areas deemed acceptable for Black people. By 1940, 84% of Black households in the city lived in this red triangular area. You can see that area inside this red section of a loan corporation's map. The company characterized the red-lined areas as having, quote, detrimental influences and an undesirable population. Let's bring in Evanston Alderwoman Cicely Fleming. She was the only member of the City Council to vote against the measure this week. Welcome, Alderwoman Fleming. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm really glad we have you because this is an opportunity to dig a bit deeper beyond just the headlines, which I think some people will assume they know this story, but there's quite a bit more nuance. So first of all, you support reparations, but you voted no on this because you say that is not what this program is. How do you see it?
Yeah, you characterized it exactly. I do support reparations. I think what we approved Monday was a housing program, which you laid out very clearly, so thank you for that. But I think when we think of reparations, when African Americans probably many Americans, when they think reparations, we usually think of the Holocaust or Japanese internment. And this falls very short, even as a first program, a first initiative with $400,000. I think for us as a government to call it reparations, when payments, as you laid out so clearly, are going directly to banks and lenders and contractors, maybe not the direct people, but many of which work in the industry that discriminated against African Americans and have caused continued low valuation of housing and everything else. So I think it's a great housing program, but it falls very short from reparations, in my opinion, and many in the Black community here, and many more people I'm hearing from as they kind of dig through the details as you did at the start of this show. So housing, yes, reparations.
I've been a type 1 diabetic.
Just give me a second. Skip this ad.
52.
No.
So let me ask you, though, the city of Evanston says that they are not giving cash payments for reparations because they do not have the authority, they say, to exempt people from paying taxes up to 28% on money the city gives out. What do you make of that reasoning?
Well, I mean, that is something people would have to do, but we do live in America where people pay taxes. People are accustomed to paying taxes. I think had we slowed down a little bit, we might have been able to work with our state legislature to see if there was a way that they can exempt people from paying taxes on this money since it's not an earned income. I don't know that was examined. That would have saved people a little bit of money. We might not have gone as far with the federal government, but I think, again, in reparations, we need to give Black people the choice. Many people, I'm sure, will take advantage of this program more than the 16 that we have money for right now. But I think not giving African Americans a choice between cash or maybe something else, again, takes away from the term reparations, because as we've seen them really historically, they've been doled out in cash payments, just like you would see in a class action lawsuit or any other kind of legal judgment. You pay the money of which you've calculated, or the judge has calculated that you owed. And it's really been quite offensive to people that this is being done under the guise of reparations.
So this $400,000 program is just the first 4% of $10 million committed towards reparations in the city of Evanston. How do you want to see the rest of that money used?
So I'm glad, again, you mentioned it's first 4%. We don't yet have 10 million. We're trying to build that fund. I think we need to really go back to the community. Even if we had have done that with this housing program, it's important that the people who are harmed have voice. They should be leading this. So we should go back to them and say, hey, we did this housing program. What do you want the next step to be? And even if people say, hey, we want employment, I think if it's reparations, it really has to have a cash component to it. We have to respect Black people's ability to manage their own funds. If we want to do a separate employment program, which we've done in the past, if we want to do some other kind of social, racial equity program as an attachment to, but under the guise of reparations, because again, Black people have kind of waited and some people have, given up hope on this. People are thinking cash payment. We're talking about monies that are earned Black people, monies that we've foregone, equity that we've foregone, wealth that we've foregone for many years just because of our skin color. And so to give us that back and say, you can only do this with it, or you can only use it in this place. Part of this program that's going forward is you have to buy your primary home in Evanston. So folks who will qualify, elders who have moved away, they might be settled somewhere else and they don't qualify. They can't be redeemed unless they move back and have a primary residence in Evanston. So I would like us to look at giving people cash, giving them the options.
Well, this Evanston program, as you know, is being discussed as a potential model for other cities to adopt. What would the impact of that be, and what are your thoughts on that?
That's another concern I have. I think that would be detrimental. We have African Americans who live, I use this example, in Mississippi and some of our southern states, where we know the racial terror that they faced was horrendous. We're not talking about redlining and housing discrimination as we are in Evanston. And I would be, I think it would be bad government policy for us to tell or give the example that you can do a 16, even 20, 100 people housing program. And that is what a municipality or township or state can do to remedy the harm that was caused, by racial terror, whatever that might have been where they live. So I think for us to set this as a precedent with such a low bar really gives a pass to so many municipalities, banks, so many people who have really harmed African-American people here in this country. Obviously, a federal bill is really what we need. That's really where the money needs to come from. But working in these small municipality bills, we need to set a high standard. We need to let African-American people know we value them, we understand the harm we cause, and we need to allow them to use the funds or use the repair however they choose to do that. And that's how we start to build trust. It's been a lot of mistrust, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of anger in the Black community over this. And so I think this, under the guise of reparation, trying to set this out has been a little bit of a bust when I speak to people, when people are calling me wanting to apply and there's not even an application yet. So, I mean, I would warn other cities from using this. I would hope that they spend more time talking to their constituents, more time doing a feasibility study, which we don't have. And before they roll anything out, the government should not be leading. We need to let the people who we've harmed lead and let us know what to do. And we need to listen and follow their follow their plan.
On a personal note, Alderwoman, I know you have deep roots in Evanston. Your family certainly does. Was this a difficult decision personally to vote against this measure?
It was really difficult. The last few weeks have been challenging. I'm 5th generation from one side of my family, 4th from another. 4th generation to sit in public office here in Evanston, moved back here to raise my kids. It was extremely difficult. I ran 4 years ago to pursue racial equity, which this kind of housing plan falls right under. But I felt like it was disingenuous. It wasn't honoring the people who came before me. It wasn't honoring my ancestors. For me to boil down all the harm that they faced, even in redlining, even as my great-grandfather bought a quarter of a block here in Evanston. I don't know what that was like for him, but to say $25,000 was going to remedy that, $25,000 that I didn't even get to touch, $25,000 that might very well go to the bank that discriminated against him. It was a hard decision, but I really felt like I had to stick with my convictions. I was hearing from so many people in the community who felt like they had been ignored, so many who had questions, and this came public on a Thursday. We voted on a Monday. There was really no time for discussion, no openness on our side for correction. So it was a really hard vote, but I knew I had to make it. I had to, honor my family. I had to honor the people who had not felt heard. And it's 2021. We've all sat through, the last year of seeing great racial terror on the news. And I felt like if we were going to talk about reparations, we had better do it right, or I could not stand by it as a Black woman.
Well, this is a conversation certainly that many people are having, and we thank you, Evanston Alderwoman Cicely Fleming. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and more yes to that sister right there. Oh, 1 second, guys. I got to stop that video. Yes. So this is the challenge I have with HR 40, with them trying to use this housing grant that apparently is going to remedy, all Blacks that were living in there during a certain period. I'm not against Black immigrants getting some repair, but let's not call this reparations. That's a whole different thing than the reparations we are owed from our ancestors' heinous chattel slave labor. The worst of its kind in the born world, okay? Stop commingling and flattening everything to try to get it done under that 10 million. Cut the checks, divide it amongst the people and give them the checks. They can pay for their own education. They can start their own businesses if that's what they choose. They can invest it for their children to create generational wealth. They can have their own businesses in our communities if that's what they choose. But you see how they do us. They give cash repair to the Jews. Barack Obama gave $12 million to the Jews for a Holocaust we had no hand in. And I think last count, a few years ago, Germany had given the Jews $833 billion with the B dollars in repair. Okay? That was 6 million Jews that were impacted. We have 4.5 million, 4 million emancipated slaves once we were set free. And of course they're no longer living. So it goes to the descendants, just like the Jews. We stand in the shoes of. So we are owed those checks. I don't need you to tell me how to balance my checkbook or how to pay taxes. Stop treating Adocs like we're children and don't know how to balance a checkbook and don't know how not to go out here and spend all the money on weed. Furthermore, if that's what I wanted to do, that's my prerogative. Who do we as Adocs people think we are, Black immigrants too, to sit up here and say they don't know what to do with the money? Who are you? I can't stand here in that white Republican talking point from our own people. As if that's a reason not to cut the checks to the rest of us who know what to do with it. So family, I want you to be super, ooper duper proud of yourselves. It is because you've leaned in, you've tuned into the Reparationist Perspective, formerly Friends of ADOS TV. You've tuned into the new Black media to get educated and to share with someone about this information, to lean on this country. And now reparations is a thing because of you, slinging bricks wherever you are, spending time like now on a Sunday to get the information. I couldn't be prouder to be in this fight with you. And I wanted to share with you, look, it's happening. Out here we passed AB 3121 for reparations for Californians. Now, I'm not a native of California, so I don't know how that's going to shake out, but it's worth fighting for California. It's worth fighting and being at the table and having our people vetted for seats on the commission to study what it will be. Because as we work and fight for each other, your checks soon come. And yes, I am just like the older woman, absolutely for local, state, and federal repair. I'm for all of it. Get all of that shmoney and do you and do it big for your family and leave a legacy of wealth. And that's why everybody should be in this movement. And I'm going to be starting a new segment. I've got to start chopping this stuff up. But a new segment, immigrants, if it weren't for Adocs, why you should be an ally and in the fight for our economic repair. These white folks lost $16 trillion in their discriminatory practices against Adocs. Immigrants don't like losing that kind of money. I'm going to be talking more about that on my show when I deal about the banker. I want you guys to watch it because I don't want to give no spoiler alerts in my review of it. But I'm going to juxtapose the banker against Cadillac and what they're now doing with Tamika Mallory. She's found a way to weaponize the executions of Black folks for the come up through Cadillac and the Grammys. I'm going to share with you the history of the racist Cadillac, who it took a foreigner for these white folks to understand excluding us from the image of Cadillac was detrimental to their bottom line. Just like everything else, integration serves white bottom line, not Black bottom line. We were doing quite well till they came through and burned down all our stuff, all our Black Wall Street, you see. So I'm going to juxtapose a movie review of The Banker and what happened to those brilliant gentlemen that weaponized whiteness against them to own banks and property against that Cadillac reparation. That's going to be the next show. With Tamika Mallory is now getting paid handsomely to do for Cadillac under the auspice of Black Lives Matter after her whole march was predicated on women, which usually means white women. Let's keep it a buck. I'm going to share with you how educated Black women aren't even doing as well as white women financially. It's going to be fire. But I'm going to juxtapose those things. So please, Apple TV, you must get the 7-day free trial. It's $4.99 thereafter. You can cancel it after you watch The Banker. But please watch The Banker because I don't want no spoiler alerts, and I'm going in to show you how these white folks work, how they don't want us to really have ownership of our own repair because we pose a threat to them in our beauty and our brilliance. Okay? We ain't gonna have time to be catching revenge. We got a lot to do and a lot of ground to cover and make up for our children. to get them set up and to teach them about how to handle the reparations. So continue to lean in. I couldn't be prouder. I just wanted to share that with you to show you how empty it is. Okay, I got one more story to share about the Catholics allocating $100 million for reparations. So I'm going to read that one to you, okay? Because I have one last show. I want to show you about my freedmen and women history every day of the year segment. Is going to be featuring the Black Panther Party. And I'm going to show that video at the close of the show. So I'm not going to video you to death, although it's also rich. I'm just going to read this one. Hold on one second. So much to cover, family. This is what happens when they shut me down. Well, guess what? I can't even blame that. This happens whenever I go live. I just love being here sharing with you, and I'm glad you tuned in. Thank you. Don't forget, let me come over here and turn on my little banner in case you guys would like to give. Shout out to everyone that has aggregated their dollars to support the show. I appreciate you more than I have the words to convey. And next time, I hope to have your names listed so I can read them. But to try to fish them out between PayPal and Cash App, it's a little much right now, given that I've got about 3 more segments to cover. I got to finish the reparations. Then we got to go into the miseducation of Adocs in America with 3K's book club series. Then we have to close out with our freed men and women of the Black Panther Party. So I will have that. But let me run my banner in case you guys feel compelled to donate to my advocacy in educating the masses. I appreciate you guys. So the way to do that is going to scroll down there while I read this next article. Okay? Let me find it. Catholic order pledges $100 million in reparations to descendants of enslaved people. Let's see if there's any cash in here, family. Leaders of the Jesuit Conference of Canada and the U.S. promised to raise some to begin process of truth and reconciliation. Well, they're getting off cheaply. $100 million? Seriously? Anyway, I digress. An order of Catholic, it beats a zero, I suppose, but this is why we've got to be at the table, as the older woman stated. When we're not at the table, it could just be anything. Throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I already told you at the top of the show, we are owed $104 trillion on the low end for not just slavery, but Jim Crow and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage. So that's on the low end. There's a whole lot more that has to be factored in that. By the time it's done, it's probably going to be about $500 trillion. We can meet them in the middle at $250 trillion. And they can do it in installments. I will not be satisfied until each Adocs is paid $1.5 million. And we'll take it on installment. You know, like they do on the credit cards in your layaways if you still got those in your town. Anyway, back to the text. An order of Catholic priests has pledged $100 million in reparations to descendants of Black people it enslaved and sold in the largest initiative of its kind by the church. Leaders of the Jesuit Conference of Canada and the United States have promised to raise the sum, which will be paid to a foundation set up with a group of descendants and to begin a very serious process of truth and reconciliation. Well, I certainly like the part of being paid to a foundation set up with a group of the descendants. That's something Sheila Jackson Lee is not allowing. For the HR 40, for the federal reparations. Quote, our shameful history of Jesuit slaveholding in the U.S. has been taken off the dusty shelf and it can never be put back, said the Reverend Timothy P. Kasicki, president of the Jesuit Conference. Racism will endure in America if we continue to turn our heads away from the truth of the past and how it affects us all today. The lasting effects of slavery call each of us to do the work of truth and reconciliation. Without this joining of hearts and hands in true unity, the cycle of hatred and inequality in America will never end. Jesuits used enslaved labor and sold enslaved people for more than a century to support clergy, churches, and schools, including what is now known as Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. The announcement on Monday is thought to be one of the largest attempts to atone for slavery by an institution and the most substantial by the Catholic Church. It comes amid growing calls for reparations across U.S. institutions, including churches, colleges, and Congress. Comrades, pat yourselves on the back. We are winning. Lean in. That was my commercial. Back to the text. Descendants of enslaved people called on the order to raise $1 billion after discovering that their ancestors were among 272 enslaved men, women, and children sold in 1838 to plantation owners in Louisiana by the Jesuit owners of Georgetown. So you see, 100 million ain't a billion. I don't even know how they came to a billion. It should be more than that. Anywho, I digress. While the order has committed to 100 million over 3 to 5 years, with 15 million deposited in a trust so far, Father Kinsicki and Joseph M. Stewart, acting president of the Descendants Truth and Reconciliation Foundation, said $1 billion was the long-term goal. Okay, I don't know where $1 billion came from. Hopefully it came from a commission of Adocs. We now have a pathway forward that has not been traveled before, Stewart told the New York Times. They, the order, did not come running to us, but because we went to them with open arms and open hearts, they responded. They have embraced our vision. Well, that's kind of cool. Each year, about half of the foundation's funds will take the form of grants to organizations working on racial reconciliation. Around a quarter will fund scholarships and educational grants to descendants, and some will be allocated for the emergency needs of descendants who are old or sick. About 5,000 living descendants of people enslaved by the Jesuits have reportedly been identified by a nonprofit, the Georgetown Memory Project. Shani D. Williams, assistant professor of history at Villanova University, said the move was an important step forward, and continued efforts to seek atonement for these egregious sin histories should be applauded. But, she added, hopefully this most recent announcement will not be the end for a religious community that for well over 400 years actively participated in and financially benefited from the slave trade, colonization, slavery, and segregation. As the first and largest corporate slaveholder in the Americas and the largest Christian supporter of segregation in the U.S., the Catholic Church will never be able to repay fully what is owed for the millions of Black lives stolen and destroyed by its own practices of slavery and segregation, Williams said. Of course it can. If you can pay 6 million Jews or their descendants $833 billion and counting, like I said, that last count was from a few years ago when I looked that up. It was $833 billion by Germany. I think we've given them around $233 million for their armies and their Holocaust. Last count. This was like 2013. So don't sit up here and be trying to shortchange. I'm telling you, $1 billion is not enough. I told you 104 trillion on the low end. They're the first and largest corporate slaveholders in the Americas. But let's not sit up here and act like you can't repair us because you're trying to act like you got to do it within one generation. This is for the rest of how we do things here. If it took 400 years to drive us into being the anchor of this country, it's going to take at least 800 to repair us. Y'all stole it. You owe it. Don't be coming to me talking about what you cannot do. I just saw you enrich yourself in the trillions over COVID, over a pandemic. That's what I saw you do. So miss me with it. Lean in, Adocs. The historian said she hoped other religious orders, U.S. bishops, and the Vatican would follow the Jesuits' lead and called on them to formally acknowledge and apologize for the church's history of slavery, segregation, and racial exclusion, to institutionalize teaching of Black and Black Catholic history, and to work in complete conjunction with the descendants of its victims to realize true racial justice and reconciliation. I hope you're watching this segment, Sheila Jackson Lee. Rashawn Ray, I think I'm going to share it with you on your Twitter feed. And I'll email it to you too. A fellow at the Brookings Institution and a sociology professor at the University of Maryland said the move sends a message to other religious institutions, but added that it doesn't come close to bridging the egregious racial wealth gap. While the 100 million is laudable and important, he said, that 1 billion that they discuss raising should still be on the table, because we know that when it comes to the racial wealth gap, when it comes to the legacy of slavery in the U.S. and what selling slaves meant for building wealth, particularly white wealth and institutional wealth in higher education, even with the 100 million, it still doesn't even remotely come close to making that racial gap. You better know it. There is an over 100 trillion with the T dollar egregious racial wealth gap. It's more than that since COVID. When Barack was in office, he enriched 1 million whites to make them millionaires, while we lost over 53% of our wealth as Adocs. And then he said no to our reparations. These are down payments they're talking about. We have a small favor to ask. Millions rely on The Guardian for independent journalism that stands for truth and integrity. Oh, I'm not going to read all that. That's a whole nother pitch. But you get the direction I'm going in, is that, yes, it's a nice gesture in the right direction, but it's up to us to lean in to make sure we're at those tables with our breakdown and our math of how listen, I don't have to make up how I got to 104 trillion. I've already shared this in prior archives, how I got there. Just look up The Black Tax by Sean D. Rochester, The Cost of Being Black in America. I don't have time to read all the line items, but you can find it on page, oh Lord, I got too much dog-eared and highlighted to find the page right now. Oh, here we go. Look it up. A summary, a short summary on page 82. And I talk about on the top of the show what it's for. So if you want to rewind and listen to what it's owed for and what it excludes, I think I do a little bit of that. But anywho, I just want to let you guys know, congratulations. This is our work. Keep the pressure on. The revolution is being social mediaized. Know that. Get your scripts. Let me put that over here. Thank you, ADOS children. Frida Gillespie. What's up, family? I'm coming to give you some love. Just give me a second. Okay. www.fix. HR40. This is the part where everybody gets to be in the movement. Get over there. You got call scripts. You got what to text the people. You've got who to text, who to call, who to email. You got all of it over there. They set us up. Lovely. The NAASD, the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, put together a beautiful Fix HR 40 campaign. You need to sign the petitions, and you need to go over there and get your scripts and get to work. Everybody's always talking about how we don't give any action items. All y'all do is scream. That is a lie. We've been moving since we started this movement, okay? We've been moving ever since. So go over there and cherry pick and just send it on autopilot, on rotation. Just send it, keep sending it. We'll make an impression, and we'll get the reparations we are owed, the reparations we deserve, the reparations we are due, okay? So kudos to you all. Now let me get over to the Miseducation of Adocs in America book club series and talk about what we get wrong about closing the egregious racial wealth gap. I'm dealing with myth number 2. This is a short read, and then I'll look at your comments, and then we'll close out with the Black Panthers. The racial homeownership gap is the driver of the racial wealth gap. That's a myth. A 2017 New York Times Magazine article by renowned sociologist Matthew Desmond stated that he thought to be obvious and uncontroversial, differences in home ownership rates remain the prime driver of the nation's racial wealth gap. Desmond is far from alone in perpetuating this misperception. A 2015 report from the think tank Demos claimed eliminating disparities in home ownership rates and returns would substantially reduce the racial wealth gap, while the Institute on Assets and Social Policy at Brandeis University wrote an entire report on how interest deductions for home owners drive the racial wealth gap. After all, the typical household, regardless of race, holds most of its wealth in home equity. Since Black families own homes at substantially lower rates than their white counterparts, the argument has it that if Blacks only achieve rates of home ownership similar to whites, the racial wealth gap would be eliminated. The word drive suggests a casual link between home ownership, home equity, and intergenerational wealth. However, a major flaw in this reasoning is that by definition, home ownership, home equity is a component of wealth. Hence, the statement that home ownership drives wealth is equivalent to saying that wealth drives wealth. As discussed below under myth 5, which we haven't gotten to yet, Blacks with positive wealth do tend to have a greater share of their asset portfolio in home ownership than whites. Since a home is the largest, usually non-depreciating major asset held by most American households, regardless of race. Nonetheless, in the aggregate, whites have considerably more resources than Blacks, greater home equity, and also higher values in every other type of asset. Furthermore, empirically, the evidence simply does not support the claim that the racial home ownership gap explains the racial wealth gap. Figure 4 shows median household wealth by home ownership rates. For those households who do not own a home, wealth levels are low for both white and Black households. However, Black non-home owner households have a mere $120 in net worth, insufficient to feed a family for a week. The data indicates that white households who are not homeowners hold 31 times more wealth than Black households that do not. I hope you heard me. I'm going to read it again. For those households who do not own a home, wealth levels are low for both white and Black households. However, Black non-homeowner households have a mere $120 in net worth, insufficient to feed the family for a week. The data indicates that white households who are not homeowners hold 31 times more wealth than Black households that do not. Among households that own a home, white households have nearly $140,000 more in net worth than Black households. While the wealth ratio between whites and Blacks may narrow somewhat among those who own a home, a six-figure wealth differential remains. Clearly, increased home ownership is far from sufficient to closing the racial wealth gap. Home ownership and wealth are clearly correlated, but it is a severe misstatement to claim that if Blacks own homes at the same rate as whites, the racial wealth gap would be closed. To be sure, a sizable difference in ownership rates exists, as well as a dramatic difference in home equity across Black and white homeowners. Figures from the 2017 U.S. Census indicate that 72.5% of whites own a home, compared with only 42% of Blacks. Now that's 2017. We ain't seen the data since the pandemic. Nevertheless, substantial regional variation exists. For instance, in LA, Blacks have slightly higher home ownership rates than Asian Indians. However, using data from the National Asset Scorecard for Communities of Color Project NASCC, Asian Indian Kamala's people households in Los Angeles have substantially greater levels of wealth than Blacks, despite statistically having no greater likelihood of owning a home. You see, I share with you from the Color of Wealth LA that Adocs is $200 liquid to Asian Indians $465,000 liquid, as Biden signs executive orders to give them protections against Adocs. While closing the gap in home ownership rates may have some benefits, the story is complicated. Indeed, there are various pathways to wealth and assets in which wealth is stored, and these pathways and assets will vary across contexts, including geographic location. Nonetheless, a major underlying difference in home ownership rates is an initial difference in endowments. Broad-based home ownership in the United States as a means to achieve economic security was brought about through public policy reforms, starting with the New Deal legislation. The New Deal created relatively sound long-term mortgage markets and down payment capital finance. It also reduced down payment requirements for home ownership. This transformed the housing landscape, allowing many working-class households to move from the rental lifestyle to obtaining a piece of the American dream, owning a home. Yet the path to home ownership has been riddled with entrenched racism, as the FHA, Federal Housing Administration, systematically refused loan applications to Black families through the policy of redlining. Might I add, into environmentally racist communities in tenement housing. Richard Rothstein, 2017, has made the following observation in a recent book on the racialized character of post-World War II social mobility policies. My book, The Color of Law, which many of us read as part of a book club with Yvette Carnell, so you can look up that archive for that book review. The Color of Law is concerned with consistent government policy that was employed in the mid-20th century to enforce residential racial segregation. There were many specific government actions that prevented African Americans and whites from living among one another, and I categorize them as unconstitutional. For example, many African American World War II veterans did not apply for government guaranteed mortgages for suburban purchases because they knew the Veterans Administration would reject them on account of their race. So applications were pointless. Those veterans then did not gain wealth from home equity appreciation as did white veterans. And their descendants could not inherit that wealth as did white veteran descendants. Further, the racialized history of housing policy in the U.S., including residential segregation, redlining, and discriminatory credit practices, have exacerbated inequality in wealth and home ownership rates, and have also contributed to the rate of return on the asset itself. Part of the persistent wealth gap across home ownership status may be explained by the fact that a home is one of the only assets in which the race of the owner affects the rate of return. To this day, family, I had my house on the market, and I learned this from other people. It's no longer on the market. Oh, thank you, Brian. Thank you for the generous Cash App. I greatly appreciate you supporting my work. Thank you so much. I received it. Much appreciated. I had my house on the market. Now, there was a house, I have a condo. I've since taken it off the market because the racism is real. There was a home with less square footage than mine, less parking than mine, and less amenities than mine. Like I've got washer, dryer. They didn't have all that. That home sold for $525,000. We're talking condos. I listed my home, okay, for not even the $525,000, for $465,000. First of all, no blacks came to see the property. Secondly, when they came into my property and they saw all the books lining the shelves, I got a whole wall full of books. You know, history, business. I love to learn. I love to read. But you can clearly come into my space. And it has a very Nubian, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, bohemian kind of Afrocentric feel when you come into my space. Hardwood floors, you know, just beautiful colors everywhere. You can tell that a sister lives here, or at least someone Adocs lives here, because my home embodies that. Inspiration on the wall and the whole 9 yards. And white folks came, Indians came, Asians came, Hispanic came. And they did not want to pay me my asking price. Why? Because my space, they knew that they were coming into the home of someone black, someone Adocs. And my realtor was like, you're going to have to take it down. No, the hell I'm not. I know what I'm sitting on. And so my thing is, take some equity out, zhuzh it up, and rent it out for $3,000 a month. That'd be some cute, cool change in retirement. So I'm not pressed to sell, but I want to see, oh, this one over here with less of all I got going on sold for $5.25. But I can almost guarantee you that was an immigrant or a white person selling that space. Or if it was someone black, they went through and whiteified it to make it palpable to get their asking price. I don't give, let me not curse. I don't give a rat's tail about my asking price and your ability to come up with that money when I know the data. When I know you as an Asian Indian are $465,000 liquid to my 200 liquidity for my people, not my individual liquidity, but our people by and large down here, I'm not coming a dime or a penny off that price. And so I shift to plan B. It'll be part of my retirement portfolio. And I've seen other articles about this that I'll be addressing, where black folks are being duped out of equity unless they put a white face on it. If they make it out like the home is owned by a white person, they can get the home sold. It will appraise differently when a white face is on it. I'm going to put all that information in the banker versus Cadillac conversation. I'm building that show. So tune in. Back to the text. I'm almost done. 3 short more paragraphs. Further, the idea that home ownership creates wealth simply may put the relationship backward. Rather than home ownership creating wealth, having family wealth in the first place leads to home ownership or a great income. I had amassed a salary of $120,000 at Wells Fargo Bank. That's how I got this home. A 20-minute walk to the beach. Those salaries aren't around anymore. We're dealing with Hispanic and Asian dominance out here in California. And how California goes, so goes the nation. It's coming to your state, especially as Biden opens up the borders. Even though we're supposed to miraculously be recovering from the COVID, he's still allowing these immigrants in. He set aside some obscene billions for these immigrants to come in and get housing. Adocs are 50% of the homeless families in this country. Where's your executive order to house them? Anywho, that's a whole nother show. Let me try to stay focused. Y'all know I got a lot of shows in me. Okay. Rather than home ownership creating wealth, having family wealth in the first place leads to home ownership, particularly high equity home ownership. As we discussed in the introduction, Blacks having minimal initial wealth to invest in homes or to pass down to their children to assist with down payments. Research by Gittleman and Wolf 2004 suggests that when Black households do obtain some wealth, one of the first assets they purchase, similar to other Americans, is a house. But without sufficient wealth in the first place, households have limited means to invest in home ownership. Wealth, after all, begets more wealth. While achieving parity in home ownership and rates of return on housing is certainly a worthwhile goal that might improve economic security, stability, and fairness, it is a widely held myth that improving home ownership rates amongst Black households will close the over $100 trillion egregious racial wealth gap. I enhanced that sentence. Today, simply advocating the purchase of a new home will not overcome the existing gap produced by national policies. As illustrated above, even Blacks who own their home encounter a large racial disparity in home values. If the goal truly is to eliminate the racial wealth gap, policymakers should be concerned with providing, at the very least, an initial significant financial endowment to Black young adults to invest in an asset like a new home, as well as an aggressive campaign against housing and lending discrimination, which limits the asset appreciation of the housing stock and financial products available to Blacks. And the next show, we are going to deal with myth number 3, buying and banking Black will close the racial wealth gap. So let me get over here and see what you guys have to say. I will probably stop this after reading a few of your comments and make a different video for the Freedmen's history piece, because we're already 2 hours and 12 minutes into this and I want to get some of your comments in. I'm only going to read the ones. I love all of you. I'm going to shout you out if I haven't already and read the more significant comments. Brian says, yes, they tried to censor me 24 hours over that Cardi B Pepe Le Pew post. Crazy. Oh, yes. Racebook is coming for us and censoring everything we do and say. It's unbelievable. Brian says they called it hate speech. Like I said, it's okay for them to act like whores on national TV, but we can't call that out. Anywho, Adrian Taylor, welcome to the live. No, they don't want us to be free, says Lady K Love. They don't want us to stand up and fight against white supremacy. Exactly. Of course they don't. Ida B. Wells, yes, you are. 2.0. Absolutely. I feel proud to carry on her work. And that's going to be another segment where I'm going to keep the magnifying glass on the Black executions by the race soldiers, all the things happening against us, the anti-Adocs sentiment throughout this country, since the news wants to pivot to Asians. I'm going to continue to expose it in a series for us. It's going to be framed around Ida B. Wells 2.0. So, yeah, it has to happen, no matter how hard it is and how disheartening it is to see these stories. I must keep it forefront of people's minds so we don't forget who the real racist sentiment is coming for. These other groups may have a touch of it. We own that, and I'm not proud to say that. But I have, since the mainstream media wants to try to pivot to put down our fight for Black Lives Matter, then I've got to be the one to expose it. They're now putting Asian undercover cops in New York City to combat anti-Asian hate crimes, Brian says. So you know what this creates the stage for. When you've got a corporate lamestream media with 3 Ks putting anti-Asian racist sentiment at the foot of Adocs, it gives everyone a license to go upside our heads and to kill us with impunity. Jamal Woods, welcome to the live, my love. Perfect to Chico, welcome to the live, my love. Monica Tapatio, welcome. Oh, thank you, my backdrop. Yay. I'm glad you like it. Brian says, in other words, they're going to call Floyd a druggie with high blood pressure to deflect from Chauvin. They're absolutely trying, his defense is trying to set the stage to make the execution of Floyd his fault from his underlying health conditions. Teresa Moses, welcome to the live, my love. Hey, Angela Nirvana, Dayton, Ohio, ADOS. Oh, that's my hometown. Thank you for slinging bricks over there, my love. Welcome to the live, Chinetta Lynn. I love y'all, Black and Strong. Monica Tapatio says, pass legislature that makes it easier to sue police officers. Good luck in getting a favorable verdict. Well, you know what? The only way to be able to try them is to dismantle qualified immunity. That has got to go. We will never get a favorable verdict if we continue in this vein. This is why all of them are walking predominantly, with few exceptions, because of qualified immunity. It's got to go. And they need the death penalty. I mean, I don't know why this isn't a given. Why wasn't this in the recent Breonna Taylor and the recent George Floyd Act? If you are unarmed and they execute you, you should not have qualified immunity, and your pension should go to pay for the civil suits, and you need to have insurance if you are a police officer. So we don't have to pay twice for our executions. Your salaries in the civil suits come out of our tax dollars. Why should we have to pay twice for you to execute us? Amos James, what's up? Dewan, Dean, welcome to the live. And for all of you that have not typed in the chat, welcome to the live. I'm scrolling through and I'm going to stop this and jump on with a separate video for my Friedman segment because we're going so long. And I didn't even mean for this to go over 2 hours, but it is what it is. I haven't been here for a while. Well, I kind of always do this, but I'm going to try to break the show up throughout the week. We'll see how it goes. I'm doing a lot of advocacy work that demands my time and interest and attention. But I really need to be back over here more often because it ends up being too long a show. Brian says the media might have classified that young lady in Compton as Asian, but I wonder if the Asian community itself does. Exactly. She's clearly Black. She's Black Asian, beautiful girl. Okay. But of course, everything gets to go under the umbrella of the anti-Asian racial sentiment to try to blame it at our foot when we see who's clearly executing them. And if you see any number of videos, you'll see predominantly white inferiors knocking them down and giving them the business. The problem I have with most of the Asian community is that they're allowing and are complicit in this spin cycle of it being an Asian Adocs issue. They're not coming to the defense and saying, no, you white inferiors are doing this to us, because they want to continue to have access to whiteness so that they can oppress us too. That's what I have a problem with. Not all. Like I said, in a future show, I'm going to show you a couple of Asians who have spoken out against this, who see it as clearly as we do. Miss Letty K. Love says, it is not greater. We need those anti-lynching laws like yesterday because we are still being lynched. Yes, we are. Nothing stopped since George Floyd 846. She says, it's not right for Asians to be over us when we've been here. It ain't right for no group to be doing economically better than we are. When our ancestors built all the wealth all these groups eat from, including especially white folks. They took away our 40 acres and a mule and gave these white immigrants and white slave owners 93 years in the Homestead Act. But we're supposed to pull ourselves up by our bootless straps, right? Which we've been doing to the tune of 35 million. We were 4 million when we were emancipated. Clearly, we haven't been sitting around waiting for them to do the right thing. I agree, says Lady K Love to Brian, about the George Floyd bill because the KKK is in the police force all over the U.S. Yes, they are. Look up the February 2000, it was the FBI report in 2006 where they exposed this. This is what their investigations, like we needed one, prove throughout this country the KKK has infiltrated. That's why we've got to dismantle qualified immunity. They're using that as an excuse to hide behind the badge to execute us. Miss Lady K says, I'm sick of my state, West Virginia. They are so racist here, it's not even funny. We are trying to get Manchin out of there. Keep pressuring. My pastor is sick of Manchin. That should tell you something. You guys, you can't give in, you can't give up, you can't give out. Get with your comrades and push, and more push. It's happening out here in California because all our chapters have coalesced under the CJEC, which is a Coalition for a Just and Equitable California. And we are working together to make calls, emails, social media, whatever we've got to do to put pressure on these politicians so that we can finally be American. So lean in, sis. You want them gone, get them out of here. Babe Racks, welcome to the live. Brian says, history of race soldiers in these departments. So these laws are passed, but mysteriously not being enforced. Ain't no mystery to it. They got a badge. Pantaleo just tried to get a job back, his job back. Apparently, they took his pension, which is a good move. But he should never be able to carry a gun and a badge ever again in life. He should be under the jail for killing, executing in a chokehold that was banned in New York. He should be on death row for what he did to Garner. He running around here trying to get his job back. America loves to kill off people in other countries under the guise of democracy. Absolutely, they're coming in there for their resources. You want to come in here and tell other people, if you don't make your country gay, we're going to sanction you. Who do you think you are? You're over here trying to enforce that transgender agenda against us. I see you, Nas X. I got something for you in my entertainment segment on Cardi, on Meg, on Nas, Lil Nas X, whatever his name is, doing devil worship and all this kind of stuff, coming to kids who love his little first song. Now he's going in and got Satan tennis shoes and carrying on. Whole nother segment. I'm trying to stay on course. Mercedes Boy 1, welcome to the live, my love. Thank you, Babe Rax. Martin Luther King's dream has not been fulfilled until they cut the checks, period. He was going to D.C. to get reparations, but was murdered. That dream is not fulfilled. He absolutely was coming. His last 3 years was about the Poor People's Campaign, but specifically was his fight for reparations. That's what you hear at the top of the show, me paying a segment of his speech on reparations, which is rich. You can find the whole speech in YouTube. That dream stopped. Our people are still asleep. Well, we're here to wake them up, Miss Lady K Love. They're coming around the mountain. Brian says, Evanston's ratchet rations. That is so good. Evanston's ratchet rations has no reparative power. Seeing as it's not specific to Adocs, and helps at most 16 people picked randomly. A glorified Section 8, says Brian. He's got a point. At 400 years, org, welcome to the live. He says, or she, this is no parts proper reparations at all. Lady K Love says, that's not reparations, period. 25,000, that's not enough. Well, my whole thing is, who are you to tell them how to spend their repair? Did you give conditions to the 20,000 you gave to the Japanese for the internment camps? When you enriched the Jews whose Holocaust we didn't participate in, did you put conditions on how they can spend the money? It's insulting to call this reparations, to have $10 million sitting up there, and it not go specifically to Adocs since you're calling it reparations. That's our fight. So why are you putting reparations on it if you're giving it to everyone? And B, you're going to sit up here and condition how they use the 25,000. What, do they owe it back if they don't use it that way? Adocs children, welcome to the live. Big up to you, sister, for keeping us abreast. Oh, you're so welcome. It's my pleasure. Exactly. It needs to be done right. I agree. Cut the checks. No, we need cash. Big up to sis. You are so right. Run me my check. Say that, sis. Let us balance our own money. We can take financial classes. They act like we're dumb. Exactly. They're treating us like children. And like I said prior, it doesn't matter how people choose to spend their reparations. That's not your monkey nor your circus. Who you? If they want to take a light and match and blow it all up, that's their prerogative, their family lineage. That has nothing to do with white folks and immigrants and other Adocs who choose to be sitting up here talking about how folks is going to spend their money. Be concerned about how you spend your money. I'm with China. Mind your own damn business. Okay. If the federal government could give out widespread direct stimulus payments, they could do the same for a reparative payment that targets a specific lineage. Absolutely they can, Brian. Let's keep the pressure on. Tamika, the Cadillac saleswoman. We have stooped to a new low. Brian said, I can't wait to do that segment. Ooh, it's going to be fire. Miss Lady K Love, I was about to say about the Cadillacs when they gave to musicians and entertainments. Yeah. Frida Gillespie, what's up, baby? Welcome to the live, my love. 1.5 million per Adocs. That's my fight. That's sufficient to start your businesses, to educate your children, to save and invest, to buy your house, and to get out from under the oppressive boots of many of the immigrants and the white folks and the black white inferiors. Adocs Children says it's a great commercial. Okay, I don't know how great it is. You don't weaponize the execution of George Floyd to do a Cadillac commercial for a company that never wanted your money until they realized it was profitable. It took an immigrant to tell them that. And then you pivot back to your all women's matter concepts, black women. How's that a great commercial? You are placating to a demographic that has some money to buy the Cadillacs. It's what you're doing. It's marketing. Weaponizing George Floyd and all the slain by the race soldiers for the come up to sell Cadillacs. And their reasoning is advocates have to eat too. Well, like Robert Townsend said in that great movie, there's work at the post office. What's it called? I can't even think of the name of that great classic. But he learned after trying hard to be an actor that there was work at the post office, okay? There's other ways to do this. Terry Lewis, welcome to the live, my love. Detroit, Michigan, the Motor City in the house. I love you for that. Willie Hampton, I see you, fam. He says slaves are pimped for new generations. Yep. You got it. Blue Morgan, welcome to the live. But black home ownership and white home ownership will never be equal, as they tend to make areas where most Black homes are located, they reduce the land value. We need to make that illegal so our homes can retain their value and grow in value. You're absolutely right, Blue Morgan. You're absolutely right. They redline you into environmentally racist communities with one another, and then they come and gentrify you and bring in good business and move you further off the map. Okay. All right, we're at 2.5 hours. I'm going to call this show, and I'm going to go live to do my segment. You're free to join me or not. I know it's late your time. Satch, Ohio, Brandon Hill, welcome to the live. All of you. If I didn't get to your name, I want to welcome you to the live. Thank you so much for joining. And with that said, family, I'm going to shut this one down and start a new live so I can keep going and finish out with my Black Panther Party segment. And you can look at that at another time. I know it's late on the East Coast. Sorry about that. I'm going to do better about breaking up the show so I don't have to go as long. My goal is to go on daily at 6 p.m. Eastern Pacific Standard Time. I might move it to 5 to make it a little earlier for my East Coast, just so I can get through all of these shows I have in me. And with that being said, family, I'm so grateful that you joined me tonight. Thank you so much for being the wind beneath my wings and for allowing me the privilege to educate the masses and to advocate for Adocs reparations. I greatly appreciate you. I'll talk about weaponizing the vote. You can always hear that in another segment. The hour is late. And with that said, family, let me pray the prayer of protection over you, that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you, the power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Wherever Adocs and its allies are, God truly is, because guess what, family? You are the face of God. You are the voice of God. Yes, you are. And you are the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. Until next time, family, you make it a beautiful God-inspired rest of your evening and work week. I'll be seeing you again sooner than later. I'm going to really work on seeing you more often. Know this, if nobody's told you today, that I absolutely love you Black, and I love you strong. Mwah! Peace, family. Thank you.